The world has turned its back on American steel. Once the backbone of U.S. industry, the material that built the skyscrapers of New York, the bridges of San Francisco, and the war machines that carried America through global conflicts is now piling up in unsold heaps. From Pennsylvania to Ohio, mills that roared with fire and pride for more than a century are silent, their furnaces cold, their workers gone. The unthinkable has happened. More than 120 countries, led by China, have outright refused to buy American steel. This isn't just an economic story. It is the unraveling of one of America's deepest symbols of power. Steel was not only a commodity, it was an identity, a guarantee of strength and resilience. And now, after tariffs, trade wars, and a shifting global order, that identity is crumbling. Before we go deeper, pause for a moment. If you believe stories like this matter, if you want to understand how decisions in Washington ripple across the world, how they impact not only governments but also workers, families, and entire communities, then subscribe right now. This channel is about more than headlines, it's about uncovering the truths that shape the world we live in. Don't miss what comes next. The end of American steel dominance. There was a time when American steel was the envy of the world. In the mid-20th century, the United States produced nearly half of all the steel on Earth. Cities like Pittsburgh and Cleveland thrived on the strength of their mills, and the "Made in America" stamp on a beam or sheet carried a prestige that few could rival. The world bought American steel not just because it was strong, but because it represented reliability, quality, and trust. But in 2025, that world has vanished. Trade wars and punitive tariffs have poisoned relationships. Environmental concerns have painted American steel as costly and outdated compared to cheaper, greener alternatives. And now, with more than 120 countries rejecting U.S. steel, the very industry that symbolized America's rise has become a shadow of its former self. The collapse isn't about a single company or a single market. It is about a chain reaction that stretches from the heart of America's industrial towns to the farthest corners of global trade. China's defiance, leading the boycott. China's decision to reject American steel was the spark that ignited a global boycott. For years, Beijing and Washington sparred over tariffs, subsidies, and accusations of unfair practices. When China imposed its final rejection of American steel imports, it sent a clear message: the world's largest consumer and producer of steel no longer needed U.S. supply. The numbers are staggering. China once accounted for nearly 15% of American steel exports. Now, that door is shut. Beijing has turned inward, boosting domestic production while forging partnerships with allies in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. The Belt and Road Initiative, already a massive global infrastructure project, is now fueled almost exclusively by Chinese, Russian, and Indian steel. What followed was a domino effect. Countries aligned with China, as well as others eager to avoid U.S. tariffs and political tensions, began pulling away from American steel. Within months, more than 120 nations had either banned, restricted, or redirected purchases away from the United States. Silent mills, the heartland in ruins. The human toll of this global rejection is devastating. In towns across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, steel mills that once employed tens of thousands are now closed. Workers with decades of experience find themselves with nowhere to go. Generations of families who built their livelihoods on steel are watching their futures disintegrate. In Pittsburgh, once proudly called Steel City, entire neighborhoods are emptying out. The restaurants, shops, and small businesses that thrived on mill wages are shuttered. In Gary, Indiana, the skyline of smokestacks that once symbolized industrial might now stands as a graveyard of rusting towers and abandoned warehouses. The collapse isn't just economic, it is cultural. Steelworkers, long considered the backbone of America's middle class, are now symbols of a forgotten promise. Communities built around the mills are slipping into poverty, and with them, a part of America's identity is vanishing. Washington's gamble, tariffs gone wrong. The collapse of U.S. steel is not simply the result of global competition. It is also the product of Washington's choices. For years, tariffs were touted as the solution to revive American manufacturing. The idea was simple: tax foreign steel, protect U.S. producers, and restore domestic dominance. But tariffs don't exist in a vacuum. Other nations retaliated, slapping their own massive duties on American exports. What began as a defensive strategy quickly escalated into a full-blown trade war. U.S. allies and rivals alike began sourcing steel from other producers, cutting America out of the equation entirely. The very policy meant to shield American industry instead isolated it. Now, American steel is not just expensive, it is toxic on the global market. No country wants to bear the political or economic cost of buying it. Global rivals step in, the new steel titans. As America collapses, global rivals are thriving. China is the clear leader, but it is not alone. India, now the world's second-largest steel producer, has expanded exports to Southeast Asia and Africa. Russia, despite sanctions in other sectors, has managed to undercut U.S. steel in Europe and the Middle East. Even Brazil, once a modest player, is rising as a low-cost supplier. These nations are not just selling steel. They are forging alliances. Long-term supply deals are being written into infrastructure projects, energy pipelines, and defense contracts. Steel, once a simple commodity, has become a strategic tool of diplomacy. And America, once at the center of that system, is being left behind. Consumers pay the price. The collapse doesn't just affect workers and global markets. Ordinary Americans are paying the price too. With exports collapsing, steelmakers have hiked domestic prices to survive. That means higher costs for cars, appliances, housing, and infrastructure. Every American family is now feeling the squeeze, whether they realize it or not. Road projects are delayed because steel beams cost more. Housing prices climb as builders struggle with higher material costs. Even the military, once guaranteed unlimited supply, now faces rising expenses for weapons, ships, and vehicles. The hidden tax of a collapsing industry is being passed straight to the consumer. The geopolitical consequences, America's influence fades. Steel isn't just about jobs or prices. It's about power. For over a century, the ability to supply steel gave the U.S. leverage in global trade and diplomacy. Nations that depended on American steel also depended on American influence. Now, with 120 countries refusing U.S. steel, that influence is evaporating. China is stepping into the vacuum, using steel as a tool to cement its role as the world's industrial leader. U.S. allies who once relied on American supply chains are turning to Beijing, Moscow, or New Delhi. The message is clear: Washington's word carries less weight when its products are no longer welcome. This is not just an industrial collapse, it is a geopolitical shift. The world's new centers of power are no longer in Pittsburgh or Cleveland but in Shanghai, Mumbai, and Sao Paulo. Can America rebuild? The question hanging over all of this is simple: can the U.S. rebuild its steel industry, or is this the end of an era? The challenges are enormous. Reviving American steel would mean massive investment in new technology, cleaner production methods, and global trade partnerships. It would mean undoing years of tariff wars and rebuilding trust with allies. Most of all, it would require a vision, a recognition that steel is not just a product but a pillar of national power. If nothing changes, the silent mills of Pennsylvania and Ohio will become monuments to failure. If America acts, there is still a chance, but that window is closing fast. The death of the steel giant. The story of American steel is the story of America itself, bold, ambitious, and proud. But pride alone cannot compete in a global economy that punishes isolation and rewards cooperation. The collapse of U.S. steel is not just about lost jobs or shuttered factories. It is about a nation at risk of losing its role as the builder of the modern world. The furnaces are cold, the mills are silent, and the world has moved on. What remains is a choice: accept decline or fight for revival. Thank you for watching. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of what's really happening, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, share this video, and join the discussion in the comments. Do you believe America can rebuild its steel industry, or is this the final chapter in a once great story? Your voice matters, and the debate starts now.